G'day viewers, it's Michael here again and welcome back to SingleRacer. Now isn't she a beauty? The Lotus 49. Hang on a sec, didn't I say that a couple of videos ago? That's right. But since then I've downloaded the DLC pack for the Ferrari 70th anniversary, and in it is another famous car from the GP Legends days, the Ferrari 312, and I wanted to see how they compare. But firstly, can you remember this lap? And now you might not remember, especially any new subscribers, and welcome to you all, but that was my very first video, and the reason that I posted it was I was so wrapped with my 1:27 time because on YouTube, at least as far as I could find, it was the third fastest time ever for this track and car combo. And now admittedly it doesn't compare that well on RSR anymore, but it was a great time for its day. But my channel is always about driving skill, but also honesty and transparency. And I must admit that I cannot do that time ever since they did the update to the version 10 tyre model. The best I can manage now is a 130-ish, or maybe a high 129, but I can do that over and over. I just can't seem to get that 127 on this tyre model because it is become very slippery and much less grip coming out of the corners. So I was curious to see how this car would compare. And so this is it, the brand new Ferrari 312-67 from the same era of the GP Legends cars, the 1967 Championship. And it's a beautiful car, but I was curious to see how it would compare against the Lotus. Now, I mentioned that with the Lotus, I couldn't match that 127 on the new tyre model, but in my second ever video I do a race with a whole lot of other cars, and given that you do the first lap from the standing start, in the 5 laps that I do, I was amazed that I was able to do 4 laps in the 130s, all within the 130s. So I was curious to see, could I be that consistent in this car? So I thought what I would do is crank up the old Lotus and fire it up to its highest AI and just see what happens and see how this car compares. Now let's have a look inside this beautiful car. It's got a fantastic interior. I love the dials, although the fact that they're slightly sideways throws me off just that little bit, but it's still a great interior just the same. Simple, compact, but just superb for this type of racing with those huge fat front and back tyres. So let's fire it up. Let's see how it goes against the Lotus, and we'll head off to the track. And now one final thing just before we go racing, because it is my customary habit to say let's go racing. But one thing I wanted to stress here was I normally always tend to race with a default car, especially if I'm doing channel challenges, so the car is set to default and everyone can have a go. But in this case, to be fair against the Lotus, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take roughly the Lotus's gears as I did in the 127 Hotlap and set the Ferrari up the same way, because that's the only way to make it fair as far as what can I tend to average the times based on these hot laps. So instead of saying let's go racing, we'll simply say let's go hot lapping. And so I hope you enjoyed that video, viewers. Now, I just wanted to leave you with some of my final thoughts, and I must admit it's much easier to drive, if you can call those cars easy to drive, but for the group of cars, this one's a little easier. But one thing I found interesting too was when I tried to set the gears to match the Lotus to be as close as possible, each gear in the final ratio was 1 to 2 kilometers lower than the Lotus. So even though this is an easier car to drive, I do feel the Lotus has the edge, not necessarily because of the gearing, but just it's on the ragged edge. It's just a better performing car. It's kind of hard to explain. This car is great to drive on say 90 to 95%, but then the Lotus lifts just that little on the next level. So as much as I enjoyed this car, the Lotus is still definitely my favourite. But just one final thing too on the AI, it frustrates me a bit. I was genuinely hoping to race this on 100, but the fact that when the car takes off and you're separated by such a distance, it doesn't actually make for an entertaining video. I wanted the cars to be close together. And the other thing too is this is kind of an alien's frustration thing, that if I was say in the top 30, I'm going to do a separate Hotlap RSR video for you to try out. But imagine that I'm in top 30 and the top 10 are all the aliens. But if you have an AI car on 100 and that can beat the aliens by 5 seconds, you've got to question how realistic it is. Now, on one hand, I understand, because the aliens also want something to chase and to practice with. So in one sense, I can understand it's good to have a car that's faster than the fastest person on any track in RSR. But at the same time, then you wonder, well, what is the real figure? What figure is it? 98 or 95 or 90, that the car is genuinely performing like the real car would in real life? And that's so hard to judge. So I hope you enjoyed that video, Hotlap. I will be posting an official channel challenge as well in the next video, an RSR Hotlap as well, different to this. But just to give you an idea of how easier I found this car to drive, I remember my first Hotlap in the Lotus ever was on this track, the Monza 66 Road Course, was a 1:38, and my very first lap on this course in this car, the Ferrari 312, was a 1:33. So I found it a lot more compliant to drive, but I do love the car. I reckon this Ferrari pack, for me personally, is a terrific pack, and I look forward to testing the limits out on all the cars. And hopefully you'll enjoy the channel challenge coming up next as well, and I'll catch you next time. All right, see ya.